Jeanne, I'd like to start with an important milestone. This year, Internews is celebrating 40 years, and all this time, your organization has supported media in different countries, helping people to get the access to the information. What would you name as the most important achievement so far?
Wow, that is a tough question. I mean, Internews it has changed over the years. Our first decade, we were more of a production company that we set up satellite space bridges between the US and the Soviet Union in the first decade of our existence. And so we won, award-winning television programming there and really trying to break down the barriers between Soviet citizens and US citizens, speaking and communicating and sort of building towards a better relationship. And so we're extremely proud of that work. But we pivoted when the Soviet Union collapsed and started working in what's now called media development and supporting independent media all around the world. And boy, that's such a tough question. I would say that being in the Soviet Union, as the Soviet Union broke up, and all sorts of entrepreneurs were so excited to build their own television stations, media all across that region. It was transformative and amazing to sort of see independent media where it didn't exist across the whole former Soviet Union. Another big success story for us, which has a difficult ending, is Afghanistan, where we went into Afghanistan shortly after the fall of the Taliban, and everything the same blossomed, opened up. Everything was possible when it came to media in Afghanistan, and we were able to help support better legislation, a blossoming of radio all across every one of the 34 provinces had their own community-run radio station, and really transformed the information landscape of Afghanistan. So that's another one that we just look at as a big success, though obviously has gotten a lot more difficult now.
As far as I know, Internews works with more than 70 countries.
We are now at 106 countries.
106.
Got a big growth spurt in the last few years.
So can we talk about any priority regions and about any priorities? Are there regions that need your help more than some others?
When we think about our priorities, we think about two things. One way to look at it is to sort of see where there's an opportunity, where there's a bright spot out there, where a country might be loosening its laws and allowing more freedom of expression around the world. Places like Zambia right now is a place, Armenia had in the recent past, places that you can see some openings and say, you know what, if we go in and help, right now is a big opportunity to affect big change, right? You can do a lot of really good. We look at that, and then we also look at the hardest places, like where it's most difficult, where information needs are almost like to save lives in a crisis or a conflict or a humanitarian disaster. Also, over the last couple of years, not surprising, COVID itself has been one of our biggest priorities. Knowing that we work with journalists in 106 countries, and the importance of information when it comes to solving this pandemic or getting through this pandemic, we really changed as an organization to make sure that we could get those science skills, health skills, COVID information skills out to as many places as possible. So for the last couple of years, that's been a huge priority for us.
You're talking about some countries where the situation with media is very difficult, and it might be even dangerous for the journalists and their lives. What is the most dangerous part of the world media-wise now?
I mean, I think that there's different levels of danger. I mean, working in an active war zone, as you know, the figure that 12 journalists have died covering the war in Ukraine right now. So in active war zones, there is that type of danger. Then there's places like Mexico where it isn't an active war zone, but the violence against journalists is really tremendous due to the criminal elements and crime scene there. And so, it depends on what, and in some places journalists can't speak publicly, so it varies when it comes to what's the most dangerous. It depends on how you want to define danger.
One of the most important media-related events in Russia last week, it was a sentence to ex-journalist, former journalist Ivan Safronov, 22 years in prison. I think you heard about that. And how do you look at the situation with media in Russia now? Because you mentioned just in the beginning of our interview how Internews helped the independent media in the beginning of independent dependency of all those countries, and in the beginning of that new era after Soviet era in Russia. And how do you look at it now when it's all like going down?
It's disappointing. Obviously, we really believe in independent media, the ability to have editorial independence, and the ability for anybody who is interested in operating in media to be able to do so and speak freely, and that's really difficult in Russia. There's extraordinary Russian language media around the region, though, continues, and there's extraordinary talent, and there's a lot of people communicating online in interesting and innovative ways. So it's really, I hope, my hope is, I lived in Russia for 3 years and loved the country very much. I hope to see an opening and the vibrancy and creativity that is there continue to blossom more openly in the future.
I wouldn't probably agree that it's still there. I mean, it's still there with people, with certain people, but they are out of country. So now, unfortunately, independent journalism is possible only outside Russia and outside Belarus as well. What can you say about the situation with media in Ukraine? Because in Ukraine, they also have certain problems, and they had it throughout all those years, like a concentration of media in oligarchs' hands, for example.
Yeah, the media situation in Ukraine, I mean, there's bright spots and there's weaknesses. You're exactly right that there is, not just in Ukraine, but in many countries in the world where oligarch control of the media is a real problem. It's particularly difficult right now in the middle of a war. I think they're grappling with all sorts of issues that are some of the most challenging issues facing a journalist. What is the role of a journalist in wartime? Do you take a more proactive stance, an advocacy stance? What triggers that? And so I've been really interested in watching the Ukrainian civil society as they're sort of weighing in on how do we keep the freedom of expression space open. And so you see these bright spots of, extraordinary cooperation when it comes to the news coverage, but you're also fighting against not replicating the bad practices of other governments. And so it's been a really interesting dynamic to watch. I think that there is, again, incredible talent there. The public broadcaster is working very hard to become an effective public broadcaster, and so we and our partners across the country continuing to report despite the danger. And so the heroism of so many Ukrainian journalists is breathtaking. The challenges that they're grappling with are really, really tough, but I see good progress there.
What is the mission of Internews in Ukraine now?
Our mission is the same everywhere we work, which is really to support a healthy information environment everywhere around the world that allows people to make good choices for their families and to hold their governments to account. So we do work more broadly than just with media, and we sort of work on issues such as media literacy. We work on things such as, the regulatory environment, a sort of a broad base of whatever it takes to build a healthy information environment.
By the way, since the war started, did you take like a closer look at Russian propaganda? Because I think since the war started, Russian propaganda increased immensely, and now it's a completely different level from what we had before the war.
I think the Russian propaganda has been out there for a really long time, and not just in Ukraine, but all around the region. So yes, has it ramped up? It definitely has. A dear Ukrainian colleague once said, you can't fighting propaganda with propaganda is like fighting cancer with tuberculosis. It's a wonderful phrase, and that our focus is always to invest in good information, trusted information, and try to sort of break through that propaganda.
In your opinion, how has the war already affected and continue affecting the media landscape in Russia, Ukraine, and in the whole world?
I think that we have a problem with polarization in the world in general. We certainly have that problem here in the United States, and you can feel that every big, from COVID to climate change to a war in Ukraine is causing more polarization, and so that's a trend I think that we see here, there, and in much of the world, which puts strain on the independent media and people trying to tell the straight facts, right? It strains your ability to do that.
What is the main challenge for the American media now?
We have a lot of challenges. We have, I think, polarization is one of the biggest ones. We also have seen a collapse in the media industry, like so many countries. In Internews, we do have programs in the United States as well that sort of looks at underserved communities, people that don't have their own media. They may not be covered by media. In this country, we have people that speak many different languages, immigrants from all over the world, and so we've been tending to focus on supporting those types of communities through a program we call the Listening Post Collective, which is really trying to target communities that might not have any media serving their information needs.
So in the beginning of our conversation, you mentioned Afghanistan, and as you said, everything was blooming in that country, and you launched dozens of radio stations and so on. So now, after the fall of Kabul last year and after the Taliban overtook the country, the situation has changed a lot.
Yeah, it's changed tremendously. I mean, as you know, many journalists felt directly targeted and fled the country. We had to shut down our operations there, completely shut down our in-country presence. We'd been there since 2002. We do, like in so many countries, work with media partners and continue to support media partners who are continuing to broadcast. We have some of our partners are still in country, still working, still doing radio programming. It's harder. It's very constrained about what you can say or not say, but there is still what we call news you can use, sort of the basic information on health, education, public safety that you can still cover in a country like Afghanistan, and these partners are still doing that, so we're very proud of them. We're seeing a blossoming of diaspora type media all around who are interested in trying to get more news, more politics, information into the country and outside of the country in sort of an inside-outside way. So new players are popping up a lot because so many journalists fled and are all over the world, as you know, from the great exodus. And we're trying to find those who are really able to contribute to people's understanding of what's going on in their lives in Afghanistan.
So we talked about the challenges for Russian media, Ukrainian media, American media, but what would you name as the main challenge for the whole world in general? What would we face in the next few years?
I mean, it's been the challenge for the last 15 to 20 years is the market basis for media, that it has been collapsing over time about your ability just to stay operational. And so I do think that challenge, just with all the things going on, I mean, COVID, brought new attention to the media, but it's also going to go away. And so how we really solve that for the long-term sustainability of good, independent news and information at the local level, that's still a big question, and it's not been solved anywhere in the world where we can sort of feel confident about what the right path is to keep a healthy, independent media alive. We work on that everywhere in the world, and we work on it at a global level, exploring new solutions and new approaches to ensure that long-term viability.
And maybe some new technologies.
New technologies as well. They're certainly making a huge difference.
Thank you so much, Jeanne.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.